Welcome in. It is the Northside Baseball Podcast. I am Mitch Whitmire. He is Jason Ross, as always, joining you weekly to talk any and everything Chicago Cubs baseball. Jason, by the way, for those who are watching, you can see the topics listed to the right. If you're listening, I always say it'll be more of a surprise. It's never a bad thing. Jason, I was thinking as we were getting ready for this one, I don't want to jinx it, but there hasn't been, I don't think, a podcast episode where we've come on and we're like, man, the Cubs are in a rut. They're in a bit of a skid. They can't figure it out lately. I feel like every time we come on, it's like, hey, the Cubs picked up a couple more series wins in the past week, and here we are getting ready for this week. And that was the case recently. Took 2 out of 3 from Pittsburgh, 2 out of 3 from Milwaukee, and here we are again. The Cubs still kind of rocking and rolling, leading things in the NL Central. Always appreciate having you on. And how are you doing with how the Cubs are going about things?
Man, it's been an awesome year. This is the most fun I've had, and this might be a little blasphemy, but it's the most fun I've had since 2015. 2016 was an awesome season, right? World Series, everything.
Yep.
But the regular season was always kind of one of those regular seasons where every game, it wasn't even a drag. It was just like, after the Cubs had been back to the playoffs in 2015, and 2015 felt so kind of out of nowhere. You knew that they were going to be better, but you didn't expect them to win 100 games good. 2016, the regular season was kind of like, I was waiting for October. I mean, that's really what you were doing. You were just kind of waiting for October. So, they win a big game in May. And all right, that's fine. Whatever. We'll talk in October. Like, that's what really matters. Like, I know this team's going to go to the playoffs. Whereas this year, it's the most fun day to day since I've had since 2015, because you turned on 2015 and there was all this hope with young players and guys breaking out. You just signed John Lester and you're like, well, maybe this is like what's going to get us going. But you kind of expected them to maybe win like 84, 87 games. They'd probably be in the wild card hunt, but you didn't really think they were going to win 100. And they almost won 100 that year. And this year kind of feels like that to me, where I don't want to miss a game. I want to watch them all. And they're just so much fun right now. And in a way that, like, I'm not like looking forward to October. I'm not worried about like, oh, we've got to win the World Series to make this year matter. It's fun. I liked watching the game last night, a Monday night game against a team, from the West Coast, and the Giants, who are a good team. Don't get me wrong, but like I was invested in that more so than I think maybe, really projecting this out. Let's say, the Cubs end up winning 95 games this year. They go to the playoffs. And then we come back next year, they fingers crossed, they re-sign Kyle Tucker. We go into next year after that. I'm probably not going to be as invested on a Monday night as I was like last night, and as invested as I am tonight. I'm excited for tonight again. So I'm just having a lot of fun. I don't know if you're kind of feeling the same way about it, but that's just kind of where I'm at with the team this year.
100%. Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I'll watch almost every game any given season, even if it's off to a bad start. But the excitement, the enjoyment, some of that like unpredictability of like who's coming up with the big hit, because there are so many candidates in this lineup, and they now are in a spot, Jason, where they have some like genuinely young talent contributing, and you're like, oh my gosh, imagine PCA in a Cubs uniform for the next decade if Matt Shaw can get back up. They have some young pieces like that are exciting. And obviously Kyle Tucker is more than just the cherry on top. He's like the pillar for the franchise if they're able to re-sign him at some point moving forward. So yeah, it's been a wildly fun first month and change of Chicago Cubs baseball. And of course, leave it to us. I'll take the blame. Leave it to me. I come up with the topics, or I at least order the topics. We're starting on a not so happy note with Shota Imanaga landing on the injured list. I kind of wanted to talk about what it means for the rotation. The good news, I guess, too, Jason, and I'm sure you saw this, Craig Counsell said, and we are per the usual recording on a Tuesday for a Wednesday, so Tuesday night's game has not happened yet. Craig Counsell said on Monday that it was a mild hamstring strain, that they avoided anything serious, were Craig Counsell's words when talking about Shota's injury, which is obviously good. I think more of a coincidence that 2 starts ago he left. He had cramps, right? And then this start, running to first base, trying to cover the bag, had the hamstring strain. So Shota ends up on the shelf. And you talk about what it means for the rotation. To me, the most obvious candidate in the world is Cade Horton to fill that role. And then we're kicking things down the road a little bit, but for the now, Cade Horton to me is the most obvious candidate. And then for the later portion of this, if it is Cade Horton and he comes up and he performs well and Shota comes back, that doesn't to me mean that, Cade Horton will send him back down to AAA. Like, it could be a sticking point where Cade Horton performs well enough if he is the guy that gets tabbed to fill in for Shota at some point during his stint on the injured list. And if he performs well, he sticks with the Cubs, perhaps for the rest of the season if things go according to plan for how the Cubs would like to view it. And I know Jed Hoyer and Counsell both mentioned Horton specifically as a possibility. And Counsell even took it a step further, Jason, and specifically mentioned Saturday's game against the Mets this weekend as a potential target date for when they could have whoever the replacement is. And that's when he started talking about Cade Horton specifically. You never want to see Shota obviously go on the shelf. But if we're talking about like the timing of it for Cade Horton specifically, like the timing for him to get the call up is pretty perfect based on how he's been pitching and how they've sort of built him up at AAA so far this season. It just kind of, it sucks that Shota's on the shelf, but the timing for Cade Horton, if you take out the Shota part of it, he just feels like he's ready to get the call up to kind of see what he has. So 2 parts, obviously. Jason, what do you make of the Shota going on the IL? Obviously, it stinks for the rotation, but what does it mean for that depth, and who do you think they end up kind of tabbing as the guy to fill in?
Always sucks to lose Shota. Really bummed about that. I just love watching the guy. He's just a fun dude. Love watching him on the mound, and it sucks that he got hurt. He's an important part of the rotation, especially without Steele right now. And losing him is not great. Thankfully, Matt Boyd seems like he's really stepping up. He's been a phenomenal signing. God, is he good right now? He was good again last night. Just a real solid presence on the mound. With him, you kind of worried about the injuries a little bit, but he's looked really healthy so far, knock on wood myself. But if the Tommy John surgery fixed him, I mean, he looks like he's a number 2, number 3. So it's not great, but you can kind of survive. In terms of when it happened, the Shota Imanaga injury couldn't have happened at a better time. And that's a weird thing to say, but I'll talk more about Cade Horton in a second, but schedule wise, if this happens in April, you're going through Arizona, you're going through the Dodgers, you're going through the Phillies, you're going through
Padres.
The Padres, like all these great teams. Well, the Cubs are going to go in, and I mean, if you look out these starts, like the very first start on that spot is the Mets, and that's going to be not an easy game. But then it's like White Sox, Marlins, Rockies. Those are not the Dodgers. Those are not the Padres. They're not even the Giants. Those are bottom offensive teams. So if you're going to go in and you're going to lose your best starting pitcher, you might as well lose them when you're going to face the White Sox and the Marlins as opposed to these good teams. What it means for the Cubs rotation, and I think Saturday is an interesting day to mention it. Cade Horton's been going on 6 days rest, and he pitched on Sunday. So if you kind of count it up, that's the Saturday is 6 days. Exactly 6 days. So it's exactly 5 days rest, 6th day. That's kind of when he's been starting every time in Iowa. So not a shock there. I think Cade Horton's the easy answer. If you wanted to really kind of give him one more, I guess you could go Chris Flexen against the Mets and just kind of say, whatever, he's up. We'll just go with what we have, and then we'll worry about it later. I don't think that you need to do that. I think the simple answer is the right answer with Cade. You look at his numbers. He's, I have his StatCast data pulled up from AAA. He is 95th percentile in WOBA against. He is 95th percentile in hard hit percentage against. He's 89th percentile in whip. He is 83rd percentile in Z contact. The 2 things that he's really low on is chase, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for him. And I think it's because he throws so many pitches in the strike zone that guys are not necessarily chasing him a ton. He'll strike you out in the strike zone. He doesn't care. He'll just throw pitches in the zone. And you can see that because his zone percentile is 77th. He just throws strikes and he doesn't care. And when you're throwing his last game, he pitched 56% of his pitches as strikes and he got 11 whiffs. You don't need to get people to chase out of the zone all the time if you're going to get them to strike in the zone. So you might as well use that for you. And then his walk rate's still kind of low, but that's more from the beginning of the year. His last 2 games, he's got 2 walks in 12 innings. I'm not really concerned about it. Pitch count wise, you're probably looking at like 80 to 85 if you really want to stretch him out there. But if he's going to throw 52, 54, 56% of his pitches as strikes, he can be an efficient guy in 5 to 6 innings. He can maybe even get through 6 with that amount of pitches, maybe a little bit less at the major leagues. But I would say he's the guy. I'd go with him. I think he's ready. He's a major kind of, he's a 2-pitch guy who, it's kind of a weird comparison, but I was thinking about it. The guy kind of reminds me of in this sense is Kyle Hendricks, and not in stuff wise, but Kyle Hendricks was, he was that 2-seam sinker and changeup. That was what he would throw almost all day. And then 4 times a game, when he felt like it, he'd drop a nice hammer on you. Boom, there goes that curveball. And you kind of didn't expect it. Cade Horton will do that too. You look at his last start in AAA, it was a lot of fastball slider, but then he'd mix in 4 or 5 curveballs and 4 or 5 changeups, just enough to, hey, I've got these pitches. They're good enough pitches. So he's not just a 2-pitch pitcher. He's a guy who has 4 or 5 pitches in his arsenal. He's been tinkering with a little bit of a sinker lately as well on his fastball. But I would definitely go with him. Cut your teeth against the Mets. It's on the road. You're not going to have kind of the hype of the crowd. So maybe kind of calm him down. But he's going to go in there with not a big scouting report on him. They're going to have AAA scouting reports, but these hitters have never seen Cade Horton before. He's going to have a little bit of that benefit to him. One of the downfalls, I think, with rookie hitters is that, in kind of a weird way, hitters are, we call them the offense, but they're really on defense because a pitcher controls the flow of the at bat and the hitters are reacting. As a pitcher, you kind of can go on offense a little bit against hitters. It's Cade Horton's game as opposed to letting, you can go get Juan Soto, you can go get Francisco Lindor, how you feel comfortable doing it. So I think that rookie pitchers have kind of a step up in that aspect where they're not reactive. They're making somebody react to them. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think it kind of happened at the perfect time. Cade Horton's got his innings right now, so he can start. Coming in the weak part of the lineup, a weak part of the schedule. So I would say go to Cade. And my guess is that you're probably the same way. Unless you kind of feel like, one start Chris Flexen and then Cade Horton, but where are you sitting on that, Mitch?
No, I'm in the same boat as you. I with every passing start, every passing outing that we see Cade Horton in Iowa, it just has me more giddy, anticipating his arrival with the big league club more and more. So I say give him, and it lines up perfectly.
It does.
Every 6th day, well, hey, Shota was supposed to start Saturday against the Mets. Cade would be starting Saturday for Iowa down in AAA. Bring him up, dip his toes into the water, see how he does. And like you said, I know it's against the Mets, but you can't go into the mindset if you're the Cubs of like, oh, hey, we don't want him to face the Mets. Let's call him up when we're facing the Marlins. Right? Like MLB hitters are MLB hitters. Obviously some teams better than others, but just you can't not call him up because it's the Mets. Like it's a good offense, but I'd be excited to see Cade Horton against Francisco Lindor and against Juan Soto and against that offense. So I do
entirely.
I do hope it's Cade Horton that gets the call up. I like your name drop of the professor because I actually watched his start over the weekend against Detroit, and he whirled an absolute gem. It was like vintage Kyle Hendricks.
There's nothing better than a Kyle Hendricks.
Oh man,
I love watching Kyle Hendricks pitch. He was just such a fun dude, and yeah, I just get that. I get a little twinge of Kyle. It's not a lot of Kyle. It's clearly different. Look at it. His StatCast page is the 97th percentile in AAA fastball velocity, which, I don't know if you put Kyle Hendricks in high school, if he'd be in the 97th percentile in fastball velocity. But they're different guys in that. But man, watching they're both, they both have distinctive styles, and I love watching both of those. So that's actually cool. I didn't see that he had pitched a gem against Detroit. I'm rooting for him hard. I just love Kyle.
He had them off balance all night. I bet the game, and I was sitting around at home, so I pulled it up on the iPad on MLB TV, and it was like I said, vintage Kyle Hendricks kind of start. Just had Detroit's lineup off balance all night. Larger picture for the Cubs rotation. Let's say I like doing a hypothetical once in a while, Jason. Let's say they call up Cade Horton. It works out well. Like he's fine. He's good. They're like, hey, we got to keep him even when Shota comes back. To me, I would still like to see them be proactive in the trade market to try to acquire like a guy that fits in maybe in that second spot in the rotation. I understand it's only May. There's plenty of time to figure that out. But, I have my concerns with Steele being out for the year, Shota now going on the shelf once. And you brought up Matthew Boyd, and it's hard and sometimes silly to even try to predict injuries with guys. But when there is a player that has a history, year after year after year of missing time, and we see that with Matthew Boyd, it does make me wonder, if we get to June or July and he misses a few weeks with something. So I think even if they call up Cade Horton and he performs well, I don't think that should have the Cubs feeling settled with where things are. I would prefer them to still be proactive in the trade market as the deadline approaches for a starter and not a back end guy like some filler name, like someone who kind of fits in that 2 or 3 spot. Are you in that same spot with me on that?
There's only so many innings you're going to get out of Cade Horton this year.
Correct.
There's only so many innings you're going to get out of Ben Brown. I think if Cade Horton comes up and he looks great, then you go to almost a 6-man rotation there for a little bit. That's a way that you can stretch out those Ben Brown and Cade Horton innings to a little bit deeper. And then, July is a great time to go replace a top end starter. It's kind of hard to figure out who those starters are right now. With teams not really in there, you could look at the Twins with like Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan. You'd want to go to like Sandy Alcantara with the Marlins, but he's been terrible this year. He's just been awful. So trying to figure out who that starter is going to be, I would like to find somebody who's a little bit more controllable, not like a 1-year guy. The minor league system is stocked right now. And, we'll talk a little bit more of the minor report on some guys that kind of like to highlight, but they're kind of at a almost a boil over point there with some of their minor leaguers. They're going to have to move some of them, and they're going to have to maximize the value that they can get. And getting a starter, I think it doesn't matter how good Cade is, you got to get a starter. You got to get somebody at the top of the rotation. And then, Cade Horton and Ben Brown can, as the season goes, those are guys that you can put in the playoff bullpen and can be really good in inning stints. You couple those guys in the bullpen with Porter Hodge and a couple of these other guys like Brad Keller. I just wrote about Brad Keller the other day. I love Brad Keller. Brad Keller is awesome. Like that's a dude right there. I really like him. But if you can take those guys, put them in the bullpen, then you don't have to use assets to acquire a bullpen reliever, right? Which you can then kind of maybe shift those assets a little bit more towards the starting end, and kind of really go to somebody who's not just a filler guy, not just a number 3, and not just a I don't even want to say just a Matt Boyd. I like Matt Boyd, but I don't want the Cubs to, at the deadline go with, hey, I think with a couple of tweaks, we can make this guy a number 2. How about you just go get one? I think no matter what happens, they still need a guy.
Northside Baseball Podcast. He is Jason Ross. I am Mitch Whitmire, talking anything and everything Chicago Cubs baseball. Wanted to briefly look back at the week that was and then kind of fast forward to what's going on now. Again, we are recording Tuesday for a Wednesday publish. Cubs took out the Giants on Monday night in entertaining fashion. A couple of long balls, including, who would have thought Carson Kelly would, become the next great thing.
Fun fact about Carson Kelly. There are 4 hitters in Major League Baseball right now with a 90% chase rate and the 90th percentile. 90th percentile chase rate, 90th percentile hard hit. The 4 hitters are Aaron Judge, of course, Juan Soto, Kyle Schwarber, and Carson Kelly, the 4 that everybody predicted at the beginning of the season who would be there.
Absolutely. Insane.
Mike. I think it was Mike Petriello who posted that the other day, and it was just like unbelievable that we're talking about Carson Kelly in that spot. That's like my favorite fact of the week.
I think we mentioned briefly last week, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe I just imagined it. We had brought up like, hey, had I told you or had you told me, end of April's rolling around and Carson Kelly's batting 4th in the lineup, we probably have been like, oh my God, what happened to the Cubs?
What happened? His run is insane. I mean, just an awesome run. I'm not quite certain if I think he sold his soul to the devil or if he's on steroids right now, but either way, like this
combination
is
of
awesome. Right.
Yeah, it's great. Last week, Cubs, we mentioned, took a series from Pittsburgh, took a series from Milwaukee. I had said last week, and I'm sure some people might have rolled their eyes at it, and I get it, but I had said to you, Jason, I thought the Brewers series was a tone setter because of how the division has gone the last couple of years and how the Cubs have come up short and how they've seemingly been, a piece or two away from, maybe leapfrogging Milwaukee. And this has been the Brewers division for a couple of years. And they have a good amount of young talent. They have good veteran presence. You talk about Christian Yelich, William Contreras, Freddie Peralta. It's just a well-run franchise, really, for the Brewers. They don't spend big. And I know that's much to the dismay of a lot of their fans, but the Brewers have just been doing it right for quite a few years. So I thought that series was a tone setter. I love that the Cubs came out, took the first two games, really whooped up on them in game one of that series. Lost the finale where they were shut out. Freddie fastball. He was good.
He was really good.
Yeah, really good start from Freddie Peralta, and that was the start that Shota obviously left early. But yeah, I liked what I saw against Milwaukee. I think maybe even more fascinating for me, Jason, was the Cubs take 2 out of 3 from the Pirates. And the one that they didn't get wasn't the Paul Skeens start. In fact, they kind of roughed up Paul Skeens, which just, like, if you told me the Cubs take 2 out of 3 from Pittsburgh and one of them is the Paul Skeens start, sign me up for that every time. And I was looking at some of his numbers, and Skeens wasn't like limping into this matchup. He was coming off a masterpiece against the Dodgers. And in 37 and 2/3 innings across 6 starts before facing the Cubs last week, Skeens had 4 total walks, not average per game, 4 total walks and allowed 1 home run. Against the Cubs, he gave up 3 homers in the 5th and walked 4 in 5 innings. And to me, it just hammered home the point. Like, hey, this Cubs offense, at some point, even for the people who are still holding out some doubt, you just have to accept this is a really, really good Cubs offense. Like, the sample size is getting larger and larger and larger, and all they keep doing is producing.
And so the crazy thing about Paul Skeens' pitch is Paul Skeens' game is that Pitching Ninja, they run. I don't know if you know if you're not aware of Pitching Ninja, it's a Twitter account that it's run by a guy who really loves pitching, shows off great pitching movement, great pitching stats, and his sweeper was still statistically pitch of the day that day. It was the best pitch based on movement, based on shape, based on everything. And the Cubs still hit multiple home runs off of Paul Skeens that day. And I think that just tells you what kind of offense they have, is that Paul Skeens can go out there and have, maybe it wasn't his best day control wise on everything, but his sweeper is still absolutely crunching, right? Absolutely beautiful pitch. And the Cubs are going out there and they're putting it on him with hard hit ball after hard hit ball after hard hit ball. And I think that just tells you everything that you need to know about the Cubs offense right now, is that even when pitchers are kind of on, the Cubs offense can be on too. And I don't think that you can say that a lot about offenses that I can remember. Cubs offenses, just this offense just doesn't quit. And I think that maybe highlights how good Freddie Peralta was on Sunday.
Yeah.
Really good. That's kind of how good you have to be. Another guy that I didn't realize how nasty they were was the kid who pitched for the Giants last night, Roop. His stuff moves gross. I went on StatCast because I was watching. I was looking at his 2-seam fastball and his curve, and I was like, those things really move. They move far more than average pitches. His stuff is pretty good. I liked him a lot, and the Cubs still got to him. They weren't hitting a ton of hard pit balls. We'll talk about Dansby later. But I thought Dansby had a really good at bat there to kind of sit in on that curveball. His stuff is gross. He's a good pitcher. His ERA is a little elevated, but the more I look at his data, I think we're going to look back on him as being a pretty darn good pitcher. He's not going to be an ace of a staff or anything like that, but I think he's a really good number 3, low end number 2 type. And the Cubs got to him last night. That offense it does not quit. And so the thing that really stood out for me last week was Skeens. And then you mentioned the Brewers. And I just wrote Wrigley North is back. And that was vibe. It was the vibe, right? PCA is coming up, and all you hear is people chanting PCA. Pete Crow-Armstrong hits that home run in the second game. He's doing the cash money sign around second base. He's raising the roof, and that place is going nuts. And I guess from a petty Cubs point of view, with everything that the Brewers have done the last couple of years, it's kind of nice to see the Cubs own the stadium again, and kind of shut down the Brewers stuff. I guess in a way, again, not to offend anybody on it, but a lot of times I think we look at the Brewers as little brother as opposed to big brother. I think the Cubs probably feel that way to the Cardinals many of the years too. So, not to say that we haven't been there ourselves, but I guess it was kind of nice to put the world back into the place that the Cubs would probably like it, in that aspect of the Brewers not being big brother and not running that division anymore. So, those are the kind of things that I guess really stuck out to me. And it was a fun week. It really was a fun week, even though they lost a couple of games, Shota on the IL. That's never fun. But the wins that they had, they were fun. They were fun wins.
Yep. Did you hear the background story about the money sign from PCA?
No, I don't know that.
So he hit 2 home runs game 1 of the series against Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And so obviously the one where he did the money sign was the second game of the series the following day. Yeah. And he said that Palencia came up to him before the game and said, like, when are you hitting a home run today? And PCA said, I bet you I hit it my second at bat. And it was his second at bat. And so he was signaling to the bullpen to Palencia, like, pay me my money. I won the bet, which is just incredible. And a great call by PCA. Yeah, Palencia said something like, when are you going to hit your home run today? And he's like, I bet you I hit it my second at bat. And he did. So he was signaling to the Cubs bullpen to Palencia. Like, yeah, pay up. Yeah, just incredible. He's quite the character and quite the player. We'll get to him again. I feel like it's hard to do a podcast like we do once a week and go about 80 to 90 minutes and not talk about PCA, because he's always doing something over the span of a week. And he was electric in that series. 3 home runs against the Brewers, all three in the first 2 games, and those 2 wins for the Cubs. Looking ahead to this week, I really boiled it down to, I was fascinated for this Giants series. And again, the Cubs took game 1. We're recording before the game on Tuesday, because the Giants they're kind of being slept on a little bit. NL West, you talk about that Diamondbacks rotation, obviously the Dodgers and that payroll and that roster, and the Padres are still there. And the Giants have kind of quietly gone about things in the first month and change, Jason, and they're hanging right in there. A pretty solid team, at least so far. So I was fascinated for that. But to me, like the overwhelming thing I'm most looking forward to this week is, will it be Cade Horton Saturday on Fox, nationally televised game against the New York Mets on a Saturday night in Queens? So that's what I'm hoping for. I don't know what you have jotted down for this week, but for me, it's Giants series, fun. Hopefully you take, at least 2 of 3. That'd be awesome. And Mets series should be entertaining going out there. But Cade Horton, if he gets his first start, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, as the minor league guy, it's you follow, Cade Horton, somebody I've been following since, I guess a couple of hours before the draft, really. Headed into the draft, he wasn't really on my radar at the pick. And then, little information started to boil out that maybe there was a team in the top 10 who was interested in him. The Cubs have been a little rumored to maybe be an underslot team. He felt like an underslot guy. So I started to do a little legwork, but it's almost like your child kind of grows up when you've been the minor league guy. And I've been watching. I mean, I watched his first start when he came up with Myrtle Beach a few years ago, and I think I've seen I've had to at least watch 60 to 70% of his starts live at this stage. So any chance that you get to see him graduate from what feels like a potato quality iPhone 6 broadcast, sometimes in some of these low A places
with one camera view,
Oh God, they're brutal. I mean,
center field angle. Maybe get behind home plate when they hit in the outfield. That's about it.
It is awful. Sometimes the sun just comes in on the worst angles. You sit there, glare. Like, I don't know if that was a slider or a fastball, but I think it looked good. So, some of the scouting is rough on these low ends. But then to see him come up national game. It's a little bit of a graduation, for me too. It's like my child grew up a little bit. So I'm really excited about that. And I think, I think it's like one more good litmus test before we kind of hit, hopefully, beating the pants off of like the Marlins and the White Sox and like just some of these teams that the Cubs really should win. They're going to lose some of those games. There's going to be a series that they lose in the next couple of weeks that they shouldn't lose on paper, but they're going to. Good teams lose to bad teams sometimes.
Baseball.
It's just baseball, right? Those things happen, but it's kind of our last litmus test for a couple of weeks. And seeing them come out and play in the Giants, they're a good team. I think the Giants are a little slept on right now, on how good they are. I think I slept on them too. And it's easy to sleep on them when you're in the division that they're in. In theory, they could be the 4th best team, but they're probably one of the better teams in baseball. I think they're a little underslept on. So they're a good team. And then the Mets, Soto, Lindor, they're a good team too. They've had a great start to the season. Strength of schedule hasn't been all that great, but they're a great team. They're a good team. So yeah, I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be a good week, and then you can they're going to kind of backslide into some of these lower teams that hopefully just be some offensive displays if things go well.
Yeah. Minor league report. We've kind of made this into a weekly topic. I think it's very informative for people who don't sit and watch Cade Horton's starts in AAA and can only read write-ups and recaps and things of that nature. I will say, Jason, before I throw the mic to you for this is pretty much your segment. Every day I feel like when I'm scrolling on Twitter, and I love where my algorithm's at right now on Twitter, it's all New York Knicks basketball, Chicago Cubs base. Like, I'm in a good spot with my algorithm. I am telling you, man, every day when I'm scrolling on Twitter, I see Moises Ballesteros got another hit. He did this, he did that, and multi-hit game, and he's extending a on-base streak or a hitting streak, and it's like, this dude, I'm very excited for his future. I know Craig Counsell said last week he was asked about him because of how he's performing at AAA, and Craig said, there's just no room for him right now, which makes sense with how Carson Kelly and Miguel Amaya are going. You can't really dispute that. But he's a name that, for as much as I see Cade Horton popping up on the timeline, I'm now seeing that with Ballesteros a lot. Incredibly fun guy to kind of tab when you talk about like how he could fit in long-term for the Cubs as a guy who could catch, but maybe play first base, DH, wear multiple hats. You just want that bat in the lineup if he keeps progressing the way he does at some point for the Cubs. For the minor league report, though, what stood out to you in the past week?
So, one, Ballesteros, here's the crazy thing is that Ballesteros had a 2 home run game. He finally had his 17 or 18 game hit streak ended, and he didn't actually have that great of a week. Which is crazy. It's like a 101 WRC plus for the week. He also only struck out 1 time, so crazy. This crazy thing that he does is, and this is like a down week, is like a league average WRC plus week for Moises Ballesteros, where he has a 2 home run game, and you're just like, it's well, he didn't put up video game numbers, so who cares? But he had another good week. He's a really good prospect. It's. The Cubs are kind of in, I mentioned it before and I'll mention it again, they're in like the perfect place for him where he can develop as a catcher, because as a first baseman, as a DH, he would be a good player. If you can get him to catch 60 to 65 to 70 games a year, if you can develop that he's a phenomenal player, right? It's a phenomenal player. And that's the difference. It's if they can get him at a major league level catcher for a 1A, 1B situation, have him first base and DH the other games to keep his bat in the lineup. That's when he turns from good to special. And letting him develop as a catcher. He's young. I mean, you've heard so much about him, and he doesn't turn 22 for 7 months. He's 21, and he's like crazy. Solidly 21. So if he spent most of the year in AAA, it's not going to kill him. Nobody's ever been worse off because they developed a little bit too much in AAA at the age of 21 and a half. So they're kind of in a special place for him. If we want to look at a couple other Iowa guys, Owen Casey is one of my favorites. I've been a big Owen Casey fan, and he's had a really big transformation in the year. Last kind of like, I don't know, maybe almost full year, dating back to about July last year. Some good, some bad. When you talk about Owen Casey, he's a huge dude. And one of the things that he didn't do a great job of is pulling the ball or hitting a lot of home runs. Hit a bunch of balls on the ground, went the other way. Great news is he hits the ball in the air a bunch now, and he pulls the ball a bunch. All awesome. Big backslide on the contact quality, though. The contact ability. Contact ability has gone down. If you wanted him to be more of a true 3 outcome player, he's probably looking more like that right now. The hope is that he can kind of swing back the other way a little bit with that contact quality. I don't think he has to be like Moises Ballesteros, I strike out 1 time a week guy. He just needs to be I strike out 29% of the time guy. If he can be that, if he can get under 30%, there's a pretty good player right there. But he has been hitting the ball super hard. When he hits the ball, it's 100 miles an hour almost every time. He's just going to absolutely crush it. But his strikeout numbers have gone down significantly, and I'm going to pull up his Statcast page just to be completely sure of it when I say what his current contact rate is, because it is not good. Currently, his contact rate on just like zone contact is about 68.8%, which is about league average, a little better than league average, but his whiff percentage is bottom 3%. And actually his zone swing, I was looking at zone swing. His zone contact is bottom 12%. So like that's the problems, right? He's chasing too much. And when he does chase, he swings and misses. And when he's in the zone, he doesn't hit enough. So if we can swing that back just a little bit, that's a guy to look at. One of the more interesting players that I don't think we talk about very often is Jonathan Long. If you are, if you're watching Iowa games, you're probably watching Casey, you're probably watching Alcantara, you're probably watching James Chirantos, who had a leg injury, just came back. So we'll see how that goes for him. And you're probably not paying attention to Jonathan Long. Jonathan Long was not a high draft pick. But he has done nothing but absolutely crunch baseball since coming up. He is absolutely smoking at AAA right now. I put him down as one of our hot players in the most recent article that we will have covering those things. But just looking at his StatCast page, it is ridiculous. 97th percentile expected WOBA. 97th percentile exit velocity, 85th, 90th percentile exit velocity, 92nd barrel percentage, 100 percentile hard hit, 100 percentile launch angle sweet spot. This is a guy who absolutely smokes baseballs, and he's 23 years old. Here's the problem. He plays first base. He plays DH. He can maybe moonlight at third base. He can maybe moonlight at left field, but he's not really great at those things. He's probably a guy who the Cubs are going to have to make a decision on. Is this the guy that I feel like can be a first base DH? If you get to that place, and listen, I know this is not going to make everybody super excited, but it does open up the concept of maybe you are okay moving a Ballesteros at the deadline. Does that hurt? Oh. Absolutely. But if you don't think that he is a 60-day catcher, like if you can't get him to catch 60 games, right? He's a first base DH guy. Well, you've got a 21-year-old and you got a 23-year-old, and both of them are hitting the pants off ball. So, like, Ballesteros has the better industry ranking. And if you can get a team interested in him as a catcher, he headlines a controllable ace starter, right? That's what you do. And the reality of the trade deadline is this: if the Cubs acquire a player that we want the Cubs to acquire, something's going to hurt. Like, we're going to give up a player we don't want to give up. And the reality is that as much as I like Ballesteros and as much as people don't want to hear it, when we talk about these players who are having great times, it's not about their AAA data, but it's about what they can be at the major league level. And if you think he's a first base DH and you have Jonathan Long, who's another one, and you think that maybe they project offensively similarly, and one of them and neither of them are going to catch, maybe Jonathan Long is a fallback option and you're okay a little bit there. And I'm not trying to say go and shop Moises Ballesteros. I'm just saying that Jonathan Long gives you that opportunity. Or maybe you get a team who just loves Johnny Long at the deadline, and that's a good second piece in a trade. It means that you can kind of save something else. So somebody like Jonathan Long, I think, is going to be very important in July, when the Cubs are going to have to kind of sit down and say, listen, we've got Owen Casey, we've got Kevin Alcantara, we've got Moises Ballesteros, we've got Jonathan Long. A lot of these guys are hitting similar kind of areas of like what we're looking them to do. How many of these guys can we realistically keep? Are we going to re-sign Kyle Tucker? If we're going to re-sign Kyle Tucker, where do these guys play? And it's great to have depth, and it's great to have those things, but at some point, having a really good prospect in Iowa just doesn't mean as much as having a good starting pitcher in Chicago. Those are the games that really matter. A couple of the guys that I kind of wanted to bring up, Angel Cepeda. He's a shortstop, third baseman down in Myrtle Beach, 19-year-old, deep cut guy. He's really had a good couple of weeks here. If you're not aware, with him, he was a $1 million IFA signing. He had an interesting story in that he actually moved back to reestablish residency in the Dominican Republic. Reason why? He wanted to forego the MLB amateur draft. He was living in the States. He could have gone to the MLB amateur draft, but he wanted to sign an IFA contract instead. gives you a little bit more choice as a player. You can kind of go where you want to. You can get those contracts. So he signed with the Cubs a little bit ago, a couple years ago, for about $1 million. So that's on nothing. That's not a small signing bonus. And he's down in Myrtle, 19-year-old, and he's really been hitting the ball well. He's up to 3 home runs on the season. He had a couple big home runs this week. And he's just, power seems to be coming around. A name to kind of maybe tick off in the back. As a 19-year-old, you're probably not going to see him in Chicago for years, but that's kind of one of those next generation prospects we're going to hear about. A little bit above him is Jefferson Rojas, who made a lot of noise a couple years ago. Last year didn't really have a lot of power. Started off the year really good, kind of fell off. This year started off slow. Missed spring training with a hamstring injury. Last 2 weeks, really tearing the cover off the ball. Really like to see that. I don't necessarily think he's a shortstop. I think it's possible that he could be a shortstop, but there's probably enough body maturity where he's going to maybe have to move to a third base. But he looks like, if he's going to start hitting the ball in the air, he's going to start hitting home runs. That's a capable third baseman down the road. So that's another third baseman, to keep an eye on. If we want to talk about a couple of other players, South Bend is such a weird team this year. They lose like every game. I brought it up last time. They lose like every game, and I don't know how, because they're one of the most fun teams to watch if you like prospect names. They're very top heavy, but they've got 2 great outfielders. I've been talked a lot about Ivan Brettauer. He had another great week. Hit a 400.
That's your guy.
That's my guy. He hit another 420-foot home run this week. He's up to, I think, 7 steals. Last I checked, at 6'6", 250 pounds. He's like 7 for 8 stealing the bases in 1 month. So he can move. But if you want to move past him, Carter Trice is a name that maybe keeping him back of people's minds. He's kind of bounced around positions. He's caught a little bit. He played some first base. He's been playing outfield this year. He doesn't have maybe as big of numbers as Brettauer. Strikes out a little bit less, walks a little bit less. But this last week he walked 30% of his plate appearances, which is unbelievable. 30% of his plate appearances, hit another home run. He's been like 26%. I think it was like 126 WRC plus on the season. 26% better than high A this year. Cool little bat. I don't think he's ever going to be a star. He probably doesn't have the ceiling Brettauer does. Brettauer just has size that you can't teach. There's nothing you can teach with Trice there. But it doesn't mean that Trice isn't an interesting prospect. So maybe more of a deep cut prospect. And then if we want to bring it down here a little bit and kind of maybe, not sit on the high horse all the time, we kind of want to note a couple other things. Cole Mathis is somebody I've been pretty disappointed with on the year. He was the Cubs' 2nd-round pick. Coming out of college last year. He had strong StatCast data, some of the best batted ball data in college baseball. He's not coming out of a power conference, so he's coming out at a smaller conference. Had really good Cape Cod league with wood bats. That's a great signal coming through, but he had Tommy John surgery. He was a 2-way player early in his career. Even in his later years, he was still pitching a little bit. But this year he's hitting only, and he's not going to pitch with the Cubs. But maybe moving to third base. But out at Myrtle Beach, he just hasn't had a great start. And it's not like he's been terrible. He's been 9% better than league average. But coming from college, I thought he was somebody who could probably really fly through Myrtle. I kind of thought his first month in Myrtle would be maybe more akin to like what Cam Smith and Matt Shaw did in their first little bit at Myrtle, which was just absolutely decimate the league. And he's been all right. And he needed to be better than all right, I think, in his first month. Now we can give him some forgiveness, right? He missed a bunch of baseball. He's coming back from Tommy John surgery. Myrtle Beach is a tough place to hit. But I was kind of hoping for a little bit more from him. So we'll see. Don't write him off. It's a month of baseball. It's his first month of professional baseball. But he was somebody that I thought maybe have a little bit better of a start in the season, and it just hasn't been there. So as excited as I am on guys like Brettauer and Trice, Angel Cepeda, Ballesteros, things like that. Cole Mathis, a little bit of a bummer this year. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully a couple of these other prospects from last year's draft are going to start moving up from Arizona to Myrtle Beach soon too. So keep an eye out on that. I don't think that they're there yet, but maybe like in a month, we'll see guys like Ty Southesine and Ronnie Cruz, a couple of hitters that the Cubs took who are young players who might see some action in Myrtle Beach soon.
Is the Northside Baseball Podcast. Mitch Widmeyer, Jason Ross with you. I always like those minor league reports, just fill-ins on names that we know but aren't necessarily a lot of fans aren't keeping daily tabs on. Someone that go ahead.
Try to bring some interesting names in there for y'all.
Yeah, someone that obviously all Cubs fans are keeping daily tabs on. We see him on a daily basis for the Cubs. It's Pete Crow-Armstrong, and I had mentioned earlier it's becoming increasingly harder to not include him in some capacity on this podcast on a weekly basis. And we love talking PCA. I don't know if you saw this, Jason. I actually have a couple different notes. I think for fans, and this isn't just Cubs fans, this is for any fan base with any player who appears to be heading towards potential stardom. Like, it's easy to get caught up in our own little bubble, in our own little silos. Like, when I talk to my buddies who are Cub fans and we're like, holy crap, PCA is like kind of exceeding our expectations for what we thought early on. And then you start wondering and the mind kind of wanders. It's like, wait a minute, is it just us Cubs fans or is this dude playing at like a legitimate all-star level? And then you start to like branch out and see what different outlets are saying, like credible outlets, and you start to see takes from people who aren't Cubs fans. And, there were a couple of things this past week. I saw Bleacher Report, their walk-off handle on X. They did an updated top center fielder list, and PCA was number one. They had PCA as the current best center fielder in baseball. And that was when I started realizing, Jason, like, okay, this isn't just like, us Cubs fans imagining what we think we're seeing. Like, it is reality. Like, PCA is playing at a top tier level, and you knew he had it defensively. You knew he had it with the speed, but the bat has been there. After I think a couple weeks of, I would just say a bit of a slow start to the season at the Dish, he has really, really come alive. And so I see that from Bleacher Report, and they're saying, hey, right now there's not a center fielder in baseball better than PCA. And if you look at the list, like the true center field spot, it's a little bit watered down, but to top the charts is still impressive. And then I don't know if you saw that. I don't know if you saw, Trevor Plouffe was doing a podcast with Chris Rose, and Rose presented the question to him, Jason. He said, if you could only pick one for the next 8 years, would you take PCA or Julio Rodriguez? And Plouffe didn't hesitate. He said, PCA. He's like, no question. I would take PCA. And that's kind of cementing it in for me because, it's not just the Cubs. It's with all my favorite teams. When you see someone like this that's on the trajectory that PCA appears to be on, you know what you're going to get when you talk to your other friends who are Cubs fans. And I always was wondering, like, what is the outside perspective of PCA right now from these other outlets? And I'm seeing, the walk-off page for Bleacher Report said, hey, we think he's the best center fielder in baseball right now. I'm hearing Trevor Plouffe say, hey, if I could only pick one between him and Julio Rodriguez for the next 8 years, like, I'm taking PCA. And I don't think it's an overreaction to the moment. I think it's just a guy who's trending heavily in the right direction. And he has to be, take it whatever direction you want, Jason. But the one question I would ask you is, like, at this point, he's certainly trending towards being an all-star this year, correct? Like, I'm not crazy suggest like he is heading in that direction, right?
He is currently, in terms of all center fielders, first in F4 from Fangraphs. I'm a Fangraphs guy, so I'm going to use the Fangraphs F4 there. He's 2.1. The closest is 1.5, so he's almost off half. He's a half a win better than the second, which is actually Young-Hoo Lee from the Giants. Right now, we're watching the two best center fielders in baseball go at it right now, and that's crazy. So this is a hell of a matchup that we're watching with the Cubs and the Giants right now. But he's fourth in WRC plus. He's third in base running added value. I think that's probably gone down a little bit, but it's hard to add base running value when you're hitting home runs. So, I think he's kind of doing it to himself. And in terms of defense, he's like first by a billion. It's his defensive run saved is so much higher than anybody else. And not only is he your I think he's the NL starting center fielder if it started today. I think the fan vote will take care of that easy.
That's what I was going to say. Part of it's a popularity contest. But if we say, let's just again say that didn't matter, I still think
that he's still
would still be for PCA. Yeah.
I don't think it matters what league he's in right now. If there was an all-star if you were picking one center fielder to be your center fielder of the year, it's PCA. He's the fourth best offensive player, the third best base runner. He's the best defensive player by far. And you don't find that across the board. There are other players who are good. You look at somebody like Lee. Lee defensively is fine. But PCA is elite. PCA is not leading in WRC plus, and that's fine because there's a few people who are ahead of him on that. But they also aren't great base runners, or they aren't a great defender. So there are very few players in all of baseball who can be an elite offensive player, an elite speedster, and a base runner, and an elite defensive player. And Pete Crow-Armstrong does all of that. That's what an all-star is, right? And that's the exact definition of all-star. So I think if we're just giving out first month awards, like, one, Pete Crow-Armstrong is going to be an all-star. 2, he's going to win a Gold Glove, and 3, you could probably make an argument that he's going to be an NL. He could be an NL Silver Slugger with as good as he's going. He could hit it all. And he's probably up. If you really wanted to be crazy about it, he's probably up for some conversation on MVP votes. I don't know, if he's the MVP, probably not going to win that. That's a hard thing to win. But he's probably getting some votes. There's going to be somebody in the Baseball Writers Association out there who's going to look at him, and they're going to throw some votes for him. If it ended today, we'll see where it ends up going. But yeah, no, I think he's got to be the all-star guy. And you said it earlier. He's just so watchable. We talk about him all the time. You can't stop talking about him. Whether he's doing cash money signs because he made a bet with Daniel Palencia about exactly when he was going to hit a home run, or if he's like doing little league home run stuff, it just doesn't matter. You cannot stop talking about him. He is the definition of superstar. And I'll go out here, and I'm actually going to make a prediction right now for anybody who's a video game fan. If you play MLB The Show, MLB The Show loves to get for their cover athletes. Last few years, they use usually young players in their second year, maybe third year, who haven't truly hit that like ultra superstar level, but are very good players. A couple years ago, it was Jazz Chisholm. This year, it was Paul Skeens, Ellie De La Cruz, and Gunnar Henderson. I'll go out there right now. I think Pete Crow-Armstrong is going to be the cover of MLB The Show next year because he's the exact kind of athlete that they put on there, right? Showy athlete, big personality. And that's the kind of guy. So I'll go out there right now too. Yeah, he's going to be the NL All-Star starring, and he's going to be the MLB The Show cover athlete. You go ahead and you can mark that right now. If I'm wrong, we will delete that section.
Did you see what Pat Murphy said about him? I'm
laughing
because it's just I covered the Brewers for 3 years for work, and last year with Pat Murphy, he has such a dry sense of humor. He's very good at like stringing along a point while you're like waiting for the punchline. He's just I like Pat Murphy. Seems like a genuinely good dude. He was asked about the Cubs series, and this was, I don't know if it was going into Sunday or after the Brewers won Sunday, but he was asked about the Cubs offense and how tricky it is to navigate. And he brought up a couple players. And then when he was talking about PCA, the quote is, Jason, the blue-haired kid is kind of a freak right now with how he's playing. It's like so on par for Pat Murphy. Again, a bit of bias having covered them for a few years, even as a Cubs fan that I am. But had you said that quote to me, and you said one manager in baseball said, talking about PCA, the blue-haired kid is kind of a freak right now with how he's playing, my first guess, I'd have been like, that's got to be Pat Murphy. So cool that he gave him some recognition. He went on to like praise PCA's play, like everything that he's doing, and then he went into talking about how incredible Kyle Tucker has been for the Cubs too. But just that quote about the blue-haired kid's kind of a freak right now with how he's playing, it made me chuckle hearing Pat Murphy say that.
Quote. I love stuff like that.
Yeah, and when you've got opposing managers, basically giving you the hat tip early on, like PCA is getting, because again, he still does have a lot to prove. Like, hopefully this is a sign of things to come for him. He's not, as established as a player in the league as a Kyle Tucker, obviously.
No.
But to get some praise from Pat Murphy, I thought was pretty cool. And I'm sure you thought that too.
Yeah, that's an awesome quote. I didn't know that. I don't know much about Pat Murphy. You kind of see him like on the sidelines, but I never really covered him. I love that quote though, and that's awesome stuff. I mean, just just kind of a random aside. The team does seem to, and I think you get this with winning teams. So like, I think part of this is just winning, but the team does seem to like, whether other teams are seeing it or, Pete Crow, there does seem to be like a good, there's good vibes around the team right now. I think, other managers are noticing how good Pete's playing. I don't know if you caught the clip, but I'm sure it's kind of a silly clip, but even Justin Turner, who just really has not played well this year, but he seems to be fitting in the clubhouse really well. There was a great clip of him pranking a bunch of the players today,
shaking the M&Ms.
Yeah, and you can just tell it. There seems to be good vibes on the team. Seems to be everybody gets along. So it's good to see Pat Murphy talk about Pete Crow-Armstrong's play. It's hard not to notice Pete Crow-Armstrong's play. It's not hard to notice kind of how he's been fitting in. I really liked his quote. Speaking of quotes and PCA, his quote the other day where he just talked about how much he liked hitting in the 7 spot, and how much he just kind of gave praise to everybody else on the team. And I like those things. So it's good to see good vibes coming out of the Cubs. It's good to hear Pat Murphy say good things about the Cubs. And it's just, I brought it up at the beginning and I'll bring it up again. It's just a fun team. This is a really fun team right now. We got a long way to go. But that's probably what's going to keep the year fun. There's I guess in the back of your mind, you're always like kind of a little bit just with the way the last few years are, like the wheels could kind of fall off, right? Like you kind of have that. And as long as the wheels could kind of fall off, you tune in excited every night. There's kind of a little bit of that, as much as maybe the bullpen hasn't been super great all the time. Damn, they're entertainers. The bullpen comes in, it doesn't matter if it's 6-2. I'm watching. I'm not getting complacent right now, because it could go either way. So I'm having a lot of fun this season. And Pete is a lot of it. Pete's a fun dude. He's a fun guy.
Absolutely. Let's finish up. Dansby Swanson. Another thing that just kind of makes me like, I just sit back and say baseball. Like it's baseball. I don't know how else to sum it up, because Dansby's batting 5th, right? To start the year and for the first month and there's clear struggles and he's pressing, and some of the StatCast numbers are optimistic and encouraging that this isn't going to last with Dansby. But Craig Counsell and the rest of the brain trust, who's ever involved in the decisions, maybe it's just Counsell, they moved Dansby Swanson down to 8th, and I see that. I was looking for the exact numbers. He's batting .462 since being moved to 8th in the lineup. I think it's like a 7 or 8 game stretch. And I say like it's baseball, Jason, because, you can't say, oh, well, clearly moving him to the 8th spot in the lineup is causing this change. Like, no, it's, he just got moved down to the 8 hole, and he is just so happening to start to put together and piece together really good at bat after at bat after at bat after at bat. So Dansby's coming alive, and if he's turning a corner at the plate, Jason, you have him at 8th, PCA at 7th when Miguel Amaya is in the lineup, because obviously when it's Carson Kelly's been batting 4th. You have a 7, 8, 9 in the lineup that's just lethal. And we talked about it a little bit last week. That was before Dansby got moved to the 8 spot, and I just think it's awesome that like he moves down in the order and it just lines up and correlates with him heating up. And again, I just chalk it up to baseball being baseball, but it's good to see Dansby sort of, if nothing else, he's gaining some confidence at the plate, and that was clearly lacking the first few weeks of the season.
It really was. One of the at-bats that I went back to and I kind of highlighted here was last night against Lana Roop. Roop's got 2 pitches that are really good. He's got this like nasty movement fastball sinker thing that he throws inside the righties, and then he's got this big loopy kind of sweepery curve that he throws from a really low arm slot and everything away. And they're nasty. They have nasty movement pitches. They move pretty good. And Dansby Swanson gets that curveball on the outside part of the plate. And I think 2 weeks ago, he pulls off that pitch and he swings and he misses. He just pulls off of it. And last night he stayed with it and he was able to pull it into left field. It wasn't a super hard hit ball, but he stayed with it and he stayed through it. And I don't think that guy 2 weeks ago does that. And that's the kind of the kind of ebb and flow of Dansby Swanson. You kind of mentioned about the drop into the 8 spot, and there's this great kind of scene from The Simpsons many years ago, where they had a bear in town, and they create this bear patrol, and there's no more bears. And Homer Simpson's convinced that bear patrol is the reason there's no more bears. And Lisa looks at him. She picks up a rock, and she goes, "This rock repels tigers." And he goes, "I don't believe you." She goes, "You don't see any tigers around, do you?" And she sells it to him for $50 because he's convinced that the rock stops tigers because there's no tigers around. And it's the perfect correlation causation thing, right? I think you hit it right on the head. When we talk about Dansby Swanson, is he hitting because he's in the 8 hole? No, it's correlation, not causation. Yeah, he's hitting. He's in the 8 hole. Do the two matter? No. But also, he just looks better again. And Dansby Swanson has always been a very kind of streaky hitter with the Cubs. He's very up, he's very down. He's very up, he's very down. And I think we're going on one of those very up swings. The interesting thing about batting order is, if you look at most of the metrics that do the optimal lineups, if you take out like weird lineups where you're like, I'm hitting Kyle Tucker 9th and I'm going to hit Seiya Suzuki 8th. You take out any of those, like nobody's going to do it things. The difference between any like normal lineups construction is basically nothing. It's like less than like half a win a season. The difference between like any good lineup that you can think of and any bad lineup, or anytime you're like, I think Dansby should be hitting 5th, not 8th. And actually, it doesn't matter long term. But the lineup right now, I also wouldn't tinker with it. It's really working. I like where guys are hitting. I like how guys are looking. Sometimes maybe a lineup change is more just about like a mental shakeup.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of those things we don't see in the data. As somebody who's played a lot of baseball in my life, there is a little bit of a mentality to it. I don't want to assign it a number, but you drop somebody down to the 8th spot, kind of how PCA said he liked hitting in the 7th spot. Maybe just liking things kind of takes a little bit weight off your shoulders a little bit, and maybe you just feel a little bit more comfortable. You don't feel like you have to do as much. So I don't think that Dansby's hitting well because he's in the 8th spot, but I also wouldn't be shocked if mentally he was just a little bit sharper there right now, just felt a little bit better, like a little bit of the weight of the world was off of him. And then
more loosened up.
Loosened up. Yeah. And then the thing is like once a couple of good things start happening, right? You have like 2 good at bats, then like 2 good at bats beget 10 good at bats, because now you're like, oh, okay, I got the monkey off my back. Now I feel just a little bit more comfortable with what I'm doing moving forward. And then you kind of go on those up and down swings. So I thought he looks really good. Checked out his Statcast page. Statcast page looks really good. I'm happy with Dansby lately. I think he's a weird guy just in general. I feel as though he's like kind of a lightning rod for fans at times. I had saw somebody on Northside even mentioned that he was they compared him to Jason Hayward. It was like,
oh, that's
dude, it's like I don't know what we're doing here. You realize his 9 wins he has in his 2 years was more than Jason did combined with the Cubs. Like, so I do feel like he's got a little bit of a lightning rod just because maybe he makes more money. And he's not a great hitter. He's a fine hitter. He's not a phenomenal hitter. And I think as a fine hitter, people kind of forget what your glove does. His glove is just so good. But yeah, no, I like to see Dansby doing well. Him hitting well is good. I mean, God, he just got to 100 WRC plus last night. So if you have somebody who literally right now, everybody in the lineup is like a league average hitter or better, which is awesome. That is unbelievable with how good the lineup is. That's part of the reason why I think they can't be stopped is because, okay, cool. Like if Pete Crow-Armstrong cools off for a little bit, well, all right, Dansby Swanson's crushing it in the 8 spot, and you don't have to, the 9 spot, between Birdie and Nicky Lopez, they're getting the job done enough. So it's been the lineup's been fun, and it's good to see Dansby doing well. Dansby seems like a pretty good dude, and somebody who gets kind of frustrated at times, and I'm seeing him kind of stay out. Like I said, that one at bat last night with the Giants, I really liked the way that he took that at bat and he stayed on that pitch. And I don't think he did that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Two things I want to hit on as we wrap things up, Jason. one, if Dansby could just, I don't expect him to. He's not going to stay on this torrid pace the rest of the season, but
no,
if he can just be, league average hitter, I just think cosmetically, if you look at the Cubs lineup as an outsider, you're like, wow, Dansby Swanson's their 8-hitter. Like, that's a damn good lineup. Like, if you have Dansby Swanson in the 8 spot, that's a pretty good lineup. Secondly, I think you brought up a really, really interesting point with, and this should probably be a whole different topic for another podcast, so we'll dive into it for just a couple minutes here, because I do think I want to save it, about Dansby being like a lightning rod for the fan base, because I've seen the same things that you're talking about. I always, and I could be very wrong here, I always chalked it up to, you remember that free agency class that he was a part of a couple years ago, and it was, there's this huge batch of shortstops, Trey Turner, Bogarts, Correa, Swanson, and early on the reports were like, the Cubs are going to get one of these shortstops. They're going to get one of them. And I think when the fan base saw, hey, the Cubs finally opened up their checkbooks for a notable name, a name recognition game, the average baseball fan knows who Dansby Swanson is. I think some fans, not knowing maybe who he was fully as a player, had some lofty expectations for him because of the contract the Cubs gave him, and because it was in an offseason where, hey, look at this otherworldly batch of shortstops, and the Cubs got one of them with Dansby Swanson. And so I think unfairly there were some expectations maybe put on his shoulder to perhaps do stuff at the plate that he just has never done as a hitter, which is fine. And so to me, that's what some of it I think stems from, is just maybe some unrealistic expectations because of that free agency class he was a part of, and because it was quite honestly the first time in a while we saw the Cubs really spend somewhat big, right, on a free agent name.
I also kind of think that maybe fans kind of like, I mean, if you look at that class, and if we go back a couple years ago, we got to kind of remove ourselves from where we're at. But if you looked at Turner, Bogarts, Correa, and Swanson,
was that who? By the way, did I miss anyone when I was saying those names? I was like,
no, those were the four.
Right?
Yeah, those were the four. You nailed it. Yeah, those four. I think if you would have looked at those, even for the average fan, I think that there was I think it almost looked at like there was one tier and then there was another tier, and tier one was Turner, Bogarts, and
I'd put Correa in there.
Yeah. And then tier two was Swanson, right? And if you look at the money that everybody got paid, like Swanson was the guy who was kind of in that second tier. I think a lot of Cubs fans kind of felt like it was a Jason Hayward thing. They signed the glove first guy. They signed the cheap option. And I mean, since then, he's been the best of all of them, which is crazy. It's just insane. He's been the highest. I think last I checked, he was the highest F4 of all the guys in the time since. He's just been really good, and I will. I like to celebrate my wins, and I like to acknowledge my losses. And I did not like the Dansby Swanson contract at the time. I thought I looked at his arm strength at shortstop, and I didn't believe in it. I didn't necessarily believe in the bat. He had only really had like 1.5 good offensive seasons ever, and I did not give his glove enough credit. And looking back on it, I like to own my losses. And I'll still tell you to this day that I wanted Marcus Giles over Mark DeRosa back in 2007. I own all of my losses, and I was wrong on Swanson. Swanson's been really good, and I guess maybe that's why I feel a little defensive on him, because I think it's I think we have to admit as a fan base that if you wanted Turner, if you wanted Correa, if you wanted Bogarts, that whether or not the Cubs were being cheap or were right,
somehow smart and correct,
it doesn't matter. They've got a great contract in Dansby Swanson, and he's been worth every penny right now. I really like him. I'm glad he's doing well, and it's good to see him hitting again, because like I said, I guess I feel a little defensive on him because I was wrong, and I like to admit that I was wrong in there. I think maybe a few more of us need to accept that. Yeah, the Cubs got the guy a few years ago, and he doesn't have to be 25% better than league average offensively to be a good player. He can be a league average offensive player and just be one of the 3 best defensive shortstops in baseball, and you're still coming out pretty good with that.
Yeah, no doubt. Dansby and the Cubs have 2 more against the Giants, and then a 3-game off day, and then a 3-game set against the Mets. So we will talk again next week. This is the Northside Baseball Podcast. Jason, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that next week when we record, we'll be talking about a sensational MLB debut for Cade Horton, if all things come to plan. Always appreciate the listeners, however you listen. We'll see you next week for the Northside Baseball Podcast.